Welcome to Level Up. I'm Sherelle.
And I'm Danny, and this is the podcast where we talk about health, fitness, and mindset.
Welcome back to another episode of Level Up. We have a very special guest in the studio with us today, and that is Ben Cant. Ben is a biochemist, a nutrition expert, and also a strength coach who brings a wealth of knowledge and 20 years of experience to the table. He specializes in gut health, chronic fatigue, hormones, and fertility, making him the go-to resource for many coaches, professionals, and athletes seeking a deeper insight into their health. Today, we're going to be covering off a range of different topics, covering hormonal conditions, gut health, supplements, and also men's fertility. Ben's here today to help us unpack these complex subjects and also provide advice to help you apply to your own health journey. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you in the studio today because I know that you have so much expertise and knowledge, but I would love to know, tell us a little bit about your history and your background and I guess what made you get into the fitness industry?
Whoa, that was quite the intro.
Match it.
Yeah. Look, I'm a country kid who I actually grew up wanting to be a vet, and then it turned out eventually I got into biochemistry. I actually started a double with psychology. Yep. I kind of wanted to get into forensics. And then it kind of all didn't pan out. And I ended up working in a dental laboratory and, finishing my degree going, hey, what's going to happen next? And I was a small kid. I was a runner, if anything. I didn't really do any sports as an adult. And, I just sort of discovered the gym in my mid-20s. And I quit my lab job to go and work in a GNC. So I quit a perfectly good job to basically, just focus on my training, which I just discovered as like a, mid-20s adult. And I just loved it. I loved the nutrition. It was really new to me, even though when people hear me talk about a biochem degree, I'm like, look, we didn't think about it in terms of nutrition and stuff. It was very laboratory based. I do once I understood the importance of nutrition around exercise as, a guy wanting to grow some muscle and, get big and strong, I had to go back through my books and kind of reconnect and go, oh my God, this whole time I've been learning about something that I could have been using, in this facet of my health and my journey. I'd never even thought about it like that, and so going from supplement stores, I went to look after that company about half of Australia, with their stores and got involved in their training and development. And that exposed me to a lot of naturopaths and nutritionists and dietitians and physios, even doctors. So that was really good just to kind of see the scope of all the different practices, and professionals out there. And then I just started consulting from there, got out of the supplement game, sort of online coaching was growing by then. And I was kind of already doing sort of a consultative version of coaching anyway. And that sort of got me to where I am now.
So Fantastic. 20 years ago, you were in supplements, or was that when you started in the fitness space? When did you actually move from the supplement space to more online coaching? Because, online coaching is pretty modern, right? Hasn't been around for a very long period of time.
It would be around 20. So I would have started in supplements at around about 2005. Somewhere around about there. I would have started consulting probably about 2010.
Yep.
Which was pretty early. I never had a lot of social media or stuff like that until I did my first bodybuilding show, which was a 4-week prep.
4 weeks?
4-week prep. My little sister was competing under a coach called Aaron Curtis. She was doing an INBA show and I'd put some competitors on stage, but she was 5 weeks out and she was getting the jitters. And I was like, just trust Aaron. You're going to look amazing. And I was like, you know what? You're motivating me. I'm going to do a show with you.
Steal her thunder.
Yeah. The IFBB was 3 weeks away. NABBA was 4 weeks away. I went to my mate and I said, hey, and he looked at me and he's like, you need the extra week. You need to do NABBA. Because I wasn't in a prep. I was lean. No. I just happened to be quite lean at the right time. But I did really well. I came first in the novice in the States, and then I went to the Aussies. I got that, and then the Worlds was on here in Queensland, and I came third. And that was my first year into bodybuilding. You know what I mean? And so that gave me a platform, which was really good. So that's kind of when I really sort of picked up the fitness side of things, and I'm thankful for bodybuilding for that.
So when was that? Was that 2010, did you say?
This has been 2014, sorry.
Yeah.
So before
10 years ago, isn't it? Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot can come out of it. As you said, it helped you grow your platform. And now with the clients that you see, are they competitors or what kind of clients come to you now?
Yeah, so prior to competing, not competitors. Like I put a few competitors on stage and I was helping out different, when I say competitors, I mean, we're talking about fitness competitors like bodybuilding, but I was helping out CrossFitters back then because I'd actually come from more of a CrossFit background before bodybuilding. So I was just like working with CrossFitters with nutrition and some soccer players and things like that as well. But then after competing, I just had for me, my little following on Instagram, I actually just kind of created it for that pretty much. All of a sudden I was just getting a lot more inquiries and I had things to post about, mainly just like fitness journeys and stuff like that. And so I did get a lot of competitors. And so I focused on competitors for a while, probably 4 or 5 years. So kind of throughout my competing career, I had a lot of competitors as well. But then sort of like as we headed in towards COVID, that was a big interruption. By that stage, I was kind of like retiring, getting married, starting to try and,
Retiring, you be careful.
Hey, I started my journey pretty late. My first show, I was 34.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true. That is late, isn't it?
34, yeah. I got into gym. Like this is the thing that I used to joke about when I would see these kids back in the supplement store days. I'd be 30 seeing these 16-year-old kids walk in. Remember, I didn't even step into the gym until I was 25 at 66 kilos. And these kids would be walking in like monsters. And I'd be like, you're 16.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Like like how far ahead of the game these guys are. I remember we used to have to go to the newsagents every month to go and pick up like the bodybuilding magazines and like get workouts from there and stuff like that. And then these guys just, as you know what it's like these days, we all put out content. It's just like trying to filter it.
Very different.
So...
Yeah, look, it's a blessing and it's also a curse, isn't it? Like information is so accessible these days and everyone has a voice, which is amazing. But then I'm sure you've seen the industry change so much, like after the last 20 years of like obviously coaching come in, bodybuilding's gone through like a massive transition in itself and just lots of things have changed as well. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, your clientele and your demographic has probably evolved with it too. But one thing which I didn't really know about the supplement side, I didn't know you had such a background in that, but it makes a lot of sense as to the content you put out, your expertise, your knowledge. Is that something at the moment that obviously you put out, like that's a lot of the stuff you work with clients around, supplements, nutrition, deficiencies, like thyroid, which we're obviously going to jump into today, but I'd love to hear a little bit about like what sort of clients you work with currently at the moment and what are some of the things that they come to you looking for guidance with?
Yeah. It's very different. So it mainly is sort of like chronic health conditions now. But in saying that, I've always coached a lot of coaches. You know what I mean? I've been fortunate from that perspective as well to connect with some amazing coaches in their own right. And I often will get them when they've got their own health situation going on as well. And that's always been really enjoyable for me to get like a client who's also in the industry. We're colleagues and peers, but they may have their, let's say, body composition goals or their strength goals or whatever, but there's this concurrent health issue where, if the head's in the right place, it's like, hey, I would love to achieve this over time, but the more important thing for me right now is my health. You know what I mean? I just want to like come to you and kind of like help, like analyze what's going on here. What are the things I can focus on and go from there? But generally speaking, aside from coaches, it's a lot of autoimmunity. So it's a lot of thyroid stuff, a lot of gut stuff actually that I work with too. And my content is geared probably a little bit more towards the niche end rather than the gen pop basics. And that's obviously not because I don't think they're important. Like I did that with group training for years. So when I first got into the fitness side of like coaching, it was all group training. And as much as people like, it's such an easy target to throw shit at, to go, people hurt themselves and like, look at the form here. And, there's these like crazy fads and stuff like that. At the end of the day, I still think I've got very fond memories of looking back on that about people forming new friendships, people gaining so much confidence, having fun, doing things. And it was all basic nutrition, that kind of thing as well. So I think that's great. My content's a little bit different these days because I'm sort of targeting the more problematic cases,
Yeah, look, I feel like there's so many people have a lot of those things, right? Whether it's like gen pop or coaches or not. It's just that I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, like it's becoming more mainstream or known about hormonal imbalances, thyroid conditions, like fatigue, right? All these things that are like people have just sucked up and dealt with for a long period of time. I don't know whether you think it's becoming more prevalent or whether you just feel like awareness around it or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would say a bit of both. Like, It's an interesting one because, you know, when you're coaching, you're trying to look at things from like the holistic perspective. You know, you've got to cover off nutrition, you've got to cover off exercise, you've got to cover off the lifestyle behaviors that sort of go towards getting someone with their goals. But anyone who deals with someone one-on-one, you know, you quickly realize that there's so much behavioral work and sort of like other health, you know, facets that come to the table here, some of which are sort of within your scope and others of which you're like, oh, that's, you know, way outside of like what I'm used to dealing with. But I think, you know, you're put in that position where you're going like, can you set up the referral for that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I love nothing more than referring to like people that I really trust in our industry. You know what I mean? So I think like developing those connections and then making sure that your client is in the right hands for various things. And I even say it now, like, you know, I get a lot of people who are very frustrated with the conventional medicine model that reach out to me. And I understand it. I get it. Like it's like any industry, there's the good and the bad. Our industry, fitness coaches, like we know that there is a very big discrepancy into quality.
Please don't put us all under the same umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. And the same goes with medicine as well. But I'm kind of like quick to also jump on the foot and say, hey, I actually know quite a lot of great doctors, you know, who I would say are just like amazing at what they do. They're very caring. They do work in a model which can sometimes probably limit the capacity in which they can, you know, work with a given patient at one time. But what they do, they do it terrifically, you know. But I think where a lot of people feel the frustration is that they get left, you know, with that information and then to try and go and deploy it and then, you know, sort of still suffering so much.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I would love to know and I don't know if you're going to have an answer to this, but are there any common like hormonal considerations or diseases or chronic illnesses or anything that clients come to you with that you see a lot of? Like you might be the thyroid man, or you might be, you know, getting my period back, or like what are some of the common things that you feel like coaches or clients come to you looking for guidance with?
Yeah, they're definitely two of the most common. Do you know what I mean? So like women who've had issues with like menstrual cycle and fertility and stuff like that, that's really common in terms of a selection of people that would reach out for me.
Yep.
And so the thing that, you know, and this goes for anyone in any profession, you have to always watch your biases in terms of like thinking about the prevalence of something. It's like, well, if you always talk about sleep, you're going to get sleep clients. If you always talk about gut, you're going to get gut clients. And that can kind of lead you to having this warped sense of prevalence and go, everyone's got gut issues. It's like, everyone's coming to you because you keep talking about gut.
True. Yep.
And it's the same thing when we talk about nutrition ideologies. Like I say, you know, when, you know, if you want to look at carnivore or keto or paleo or whatever it is, and that the thing is with these things is they become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're like an echo chamber. You know, if you go into like a Facebook group that's a keto group, and everyone in there is getting results and they're all like, you know, they're all patting each other on the back for successfully, you know, like sticking to the diet or whatever it is and getting great results. The people that don't get results stop talking. You know what I mean? They leave that group.
Gets a bit culty in some of those spaces.
Selection bias in terms of like thinking that it's successful, because the people that don't find it successful generally leave, or in a lot of cases, they're kind of made to leave because of, you know, the feeling of discomfort about like, oh, well, you're not doing it right, or you're not doing this, you know. And you see it like, I've known a lot of people who've been vegan or plant-based or vegetarian, and when they decide to, you know, start consuming meat again, you know, have had horrific experiences from communities that have previously like, you know, adored them. And you even see it now with carnivores.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like one of the main guys, Paul Saladino, I think it is, you know, he's just started introducing honey and fruits. These carnivores are slaying him for like putting these things back in. And you're just like, you know, for me, I've always sort of said, look, I just give people time, you know, when they're like really in the depths of like a particular methodology or ideology around nutrition, for example. I'm like, give them 5 years, see what they think then. Because, you know, oftentimes that's enough time to kind of realize that the things that, you know, really count may not be the way that you thought they were, and a lot of balance gets reached over time. And, you know, you did a post about this the other day about the cyclical nature of things like nutrition, or you know, things come back in vogue, like particular diets or detoxes or this or that. And I say the same thing. I was, you know, like for me, looking at carnivore now is so reflective of 20, 30 years ago, people doing Atkins. Most Atkins people just ate meat. You know, they were supposed to eat, you know, vegetables and things like that as well. But I remember people coming into these GNC supplement stores doing Atkins, all they would eat was meat, which by today's standards, would be carnivore.
Yeah,
You know, so
for sure.
it's just, you know, like a generalized omnivorous diet isn't going to sell a #1 best-selling book anytime soon.
Exactly.
It's pretty boring.
We all agree on that. When
Yeah.
you do have clients come to you then, what kind of testing do you take them through, or how do you know when you can take them on versus referring out to your team of specialists? Like, what kind of process do they go through, and what are your main methods? For example, someone with fertility issues, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
What do? They come to you, and then what happens?
Yeah, so I'll actually do a verbal inquiry call with everyone, and that's just like a 15-minute call just to see that I'm the right person for the job and just give me a chance to ask some questions as well. And that's also an opportunity for me to look at whether I think that there's some tests that should be done prior to that initial consultation. Some people will put like a really large emphasis on testing, you know what I mean? Because it's quantifiable data, you know, they feel like, it can be sort of like a hot topic or, you know, in fad right now and things like that as well. And I've always taken the approach of like, look, pretty general but comprehensive basic set of blood work is usually sufficient for me to do my job. And that is to look that through the nutritional lens, you know, to see like what someone's nutritional status might be, like if that may be impacting, you know, things like fertility or thyroid or gut or whatever, you know, that might be. And then use an hour-long consultative process to, you know, go through and really sort of like build out the things that are likely to be items of focus, and then go from there. And then sometimes it might be a case of referring out, you know what I mean? So people might have particular issues where you're like, yep, okay, I think it'd be good to get some imaging done for that. Like take gut issues with like a colonoscopy or gastroscopy, which ideally young people shouldn't have to do. But there gets a point with people that have undergone a lot of different strategies, like years of trying to intervene on things, 10 plus different practitioners or professionals that they've seen, systemic, persistent, and significantly life-altering kind of symptoms. Yet they may not have gone through and got that, you know, gastroscopy done yet. You know, in a lot of cases, I'll take a bit of a look at that and go, I think you might need to get this done.
Yeah.
And to give an example, of the last 4 gastroscopies and colonoscopies I've got done, 3 of them in what I would call younger clients compared to traditional, all 3 of the younger ones had something significant. You know, 2 cases of eosinophilic esophagitis, 1 case of celiac disease. You know, so which is, you know, previously unknown. So I think being able to kind of make that call, you know, so some preliminary data is good. Some people want to get more straight off the bat. I don't like overspending people's money, you know, for the sake of testing. I think we live in a wonderful age where you can get private testing pretty easily in a country like ours. We're really fortunate. Like I work with people all over the world, and there are some countries that are horrific to try and get testing done.
Okay.
It's so expensive or just not available. But I think really having the first set of basics done and then sort of take it from there.
A lot of the tests can be really expensive too, right? Like, and if I can imagine if someone's like, yep, you need a stool test, you need all these labs done, you need this blood, you need your, you know, your thyroid, you know, all these things, scans, etc. It could probably add up a lot, but and it sounds like as well, you're obviously very, you know, experienced in what you do. You can chat with someone, look at some bloods and go, okay, this warrants these extra tests. But I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can't do that. And that's why they just throw everything and be like, I need the test to tell me what's wrong, rather than being able to assess the client based off some basics and then, you know, and then prescribe or reach out, refer, etc. to the appropriate place. I don't know if that resonates or that's something that you go through, but it sounds like you've got like this process where you can look at some basics and then refer out, rather than saying like, get everything done so I can read the reports and then decide.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, you know, we're in an age now of like automation and AI, and like, it's coming, like, and it's going to be amazing actually for a lot of the analyzing of things like bloods and stuff like that. But
totally.
we're still at a point in time right now where that initial decision making, like, you know, I think about things like an allocation of people's funds, so an investment, their time and their efforts. You know, if you're going to undergo like a particular nutrition protocol or supplement regime or something like that, it's time, money, and effort to do those things. And so you want to make sure that you've got those efforts, you know, placed in the right area. You know, so
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything for you at the moment that like stands out of, like, you've mentioned like obviously losing your cycle, thyroid issues, gut issues, like is there anything else that attracts or clients are attracted to you to work on? Chronic fatigue seems like to be one that comes up.
Yeah, like a lot of chronic fatigue. Yeah, I think like fatigue's such an interesting one because, as in broadly speaking, with like most people now, we're just, I'm sure you guys both deal with like a lot of people that are just permanently wired and tired. And, so there's like this persistent element of sleep issues and stress and anxiety. And I think that plays a really significant role. Like take gut, for instance. I nearly stopped doing gut content. I think it was in 2018 because I was one of those times when I actually got frustrated. I try not to get frustrated about a lot of things, but I just remember thinking so much of these gut issues that I was seeing in clients was a stress, depression, anxiety, or low mood issue. And they would go away on holidays and all their gut symptoms would disappear.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So all these previous triggers, whether it was wheat or alcohol or whatever, and you would spend this time, removing these triggers, working on it, and then they would go away and they would go and eat anything, drink anything, zero symptoms. I'm like, hey.
All the gluten, all the dairy.
Yeah. You have a stress issue, and so we know the correlations with the gut and things like anxiety and stress and things like that. So, even, going to deliver like a speech, in front of people for an acute period of time, you're going to have an elevation in things like cortisol and norepinephrine. And that's because, you might be excited, you might be a little bit stressed, you are in a higher state of mental arousal, but that is a temporary period with your gut where you have increased intestinal permeability, like a leaky gut as it's called. Now, that's okay in the short term, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Persistent, that's not cool, and so this is where like chronically elevated cortisol or norepinephrine and these stress things, they play out, So even if you look at a hostile marriage versus a healthy marriage, the couples in the hostile marriage will have more leaky gut.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Really, that's so interesting. Stress is so big, right? And it's definitely something we wanted to chat about because so much is on the internet about stress and cortisol and all these things. And there's two sides, right? I feel like there's one type of client that I speak to a lot, and I already know. I can see they've got their Aura ring on, they never miss, they track all their macros, they do all the things. They're so tightly wound that I feel like I'm like, hey, let's just like relax it a little bit, and I see positive outcomes from doing that versus the opposite where some people actually need to tighten the reins to improve like their stress management. And I'm sure you absolutely get the first client a lot where you're like, they're walking in with their Whoop band on and they're doing all the things to the nth degree. But when it comes to stress, like how much of an impact does stress play on like our health, our hormones, whether we're running into chronic fatigue or gut issues? Like, is it as important as what everyone speaks about?
In my opinion, yes. The problem is, and this goes for a lot of what we call like a subclinical health issues, is there can be little agreed upon global standards of things. So you're kind of left in this gray area in terms of like evidence to support what you're saying. This is why, you've got to sort of appreciate that. Like, so say we wanted to look at stress on the gut. We can't get something past an ethics board where we're going to sit here and like stress one of us out like crazy. You know what I mean? And see what happens to your gut. Like you ain't getting like that kind of a study anytime soon.
That's why it frustrates me when people are like, oh, well, what's the research say? It's like, it's not research for everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about like a randomized controlled trial, where these settings and you've got a placebo group and you've got an intervention group, you're just not going to find those kind of trials done that might really give you that kind of evidence and then support to do it. But you have other data. We have like animal models, so they'll stress mice out and things like that. They'll have cross-sectional data or longitudinal data, which basically means they can look at certain groups over time and develop like associations and correlations. And unfortunately, like I think they're really useful if you take them in context. The trolls on the internet, though, the lowest IQ scientific statement you can see out there is correlation isn't causation, because everyone knows that one. And it's like there are people jumping around to any non-randomized controlled trial going, correlation isn't causation.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yes, we know that. Like, we all know that. Like
Everyone's
no
evidence-based.
scientist actually ever says that because it kind of goes without saying. But that's the internet for you. So, but I think, back to your question, that stress plays a really, really big role in the pathology of a lot of disease. And that it's like a very big contributing factor years, decades in advance of, what may become like quite a significant health issue for people.
Yep.
And I think one of my, again, sort of like to come back to some frustrations is I think some of the hardest clients to work with are those that have had some serious trauma. Because and sort of we have, certain evidence on this as well, that it can really impact efforts at doing things. So, if you have someone with some serious trauma trying to go through a fat loss phase, you know what I mean? Or to address some underlying gut issues or things like that. There is just changes in the physiology that are really separate from like healthy people that can make it really hard. What frustrates me though is when people have stress and anxiety and there's so much they could be doing about it that they don't, because it's not the sexy thing. Trying to get someone to slow down and, before they eat, to like organize their day so they've got time to eat.
Yeah.
Like these basic fundamental things of like, go and read James Clear's Atomic Habits book, please. Go and do this and this. And then don't just read it, action it. Like you cannot out-supplement yourself out of these basic appreciation that your mental health is going to be tied into something like your gut health. And it's bidirectional, meaning like if you have a lot of gut inflammation and these either the clinical or subclinical kind of issues, you're probably going to be much more likely to be depressed and anxious and everything, and the other way around. So it's very much a bidirectional relationship.
Yeah, I see it at the moment, like cortisol. Everyone's talking about cortisol. I don't know if you're seeing it all on the internet. You're probably a little bit out of the niche that maybe I'm in, but have you heard of cortisol face?
Cortisol face.
Have you heard of that?
No, is it like a Zempic face?
You guys got to get on
That's what
TikTok.
comes
Yeah. No, a lot of people are talking about like, I swapped my weightlifting for Pilates and I lost 15 kilos. Or, I swapped doing high intensity for yoga and I lost all of this weight because cortisol. And it's a very big trend, more in the, I want to say like early 20s, sort of that age group that I've seen pop up on a little bit. And my question for you is, how much does cortisol actually have a significant impact on fat loss? Like I understand that stress does, but how much? Do you know what I mean? Like does it really impact like a calorie deficit or how our body actually breaks down and utilizes fat? I'm just really curious to hear your sense on like whether that is significant.
Yeah, look, I would say that what you have is contradictory data on that anyway. You know what I mean? So if you look at different studies and you sort of like put bits and pieces together, you'll find a little bit of both. So you'd probably have like a fairly much a null effect, from that. I do think for me, it's not just cortisol, although cortisol is really important. So go back to before what I said. So cortisol, for instance, will increase the permeability of the gut. Okay, that's like physiologically sound, it's fact, but it's not something that you then designate cortisol as bad. You know what I mean? Cortisol has its role in the body, and in acute settings, like things are generally fine. It's when there's chronic persistent issues. But people with high cortisol also might be the type of people that are in a constantly, aroused state, meaning like a fight or flight sympathetic dominant state as well. They might have concurrent sleep issues, which may or may not be a factor contributing to that or a result of, that stress as well. So I think people that have that cluster of things, like one or more of those things going on, are probably going to be more drawn again to the things that are less intense, So whether it's like, hey, I swapped from weights training to Pilates and I got better results. Maybe you did need to. Do you know what I mean? Maybe, that actually gave you an anchor.
A reason to slow down.
Yeah. And then that sort of like a domino effect played out onto your ability to digest better, your ability to fall asleep better. So I'm all up for that, and this is where, you want to distinguish between what's useful for you and what you should go around telling everyone else they should do.
Totally. Case by case, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are some other detrimental behaviours that are common that you see that people undergo to put them in that elevated state?
I think to your point before about when people are sort of over analytic in terms of their health efforts. That's a thread we can pull on for a second, right? So I will get people that'll be like really obsessed with like the metrics, and they'll almost just want to have the number I want my HRV higher.
Yeah.
You know?
My recovery's 56 today.
Yeah. And I'm sure we've all had, clients like that. And you go through this phase of realizing, data's good, but geez, it's not good when it winds a client up into an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to thread the needle between what's useful and also looking out for those warning signs. If it could be contributing to like a worsening effect. So I think being able to understand that is important and be able to make the call. Whether there's been plenty of times my spreadsheets that I use, because I can't really use an app to capture a lot of the data that I'm trying to get with clients. There's a lot of symptoms that I might be tracking. It's very customizable depending on the person. So I use a spreadsheet. There has been more than one occasion, probably per month, where I have to hide columns and I do all sorts of things to go, you know what? You need to do less thinking about what's going on here. Whilst I need this data, I need to, as a coach, figure out a way that's more beneficial in regard to your mental health as well.
Yeah.
And so that can be really important. But I think as well, and this is, something that I've changed my mind on over the years is like just to appreciate that, like take people's food environment. I think there's one of the biggest things in our industry in the fitness and nutrition world is like flexible eating or informed eating patterns versus like these other methods, restrictive eating or like I don't eat food groups, I intermittent fast, these kind of things. And I think what I have a real appreciation of, which I did early on, and then I think I kind of swayed into like I really want people to develop really flexible kind of things that it'll lead to better long-term success. But what I've discovered over time is that I think that the people that achieve really good balance and long-term consistency with their flexibilities also have a sort of certain amount of abstinence of certain foods or foods being in the house or boundaries, I should say, maybe is a better word, that they also appreciate as well and go, I can moderate really well off these particular foods. Like these are no worries whatsoever. These I can moderate really well with my flexible parameters that I've got. And these I don't moderate well. So for long-term success, I abstain from those, And I think that it's that over here in the evidence-based world became really like an easy target, to kind of go like, you shouldn't be abstaining from everything. It's everything in moderation, everything in balance. And I'm like, I just don't really see that playing out for a lot of people long-term, And I think our job as coaches and practitioners is to kind of appreciate like what an individual is bringing to the table and then help them help themselves, And we're just living in a very different time. So when people say things like intuitive eating and things like that, I'm like, you are talking about a biology evolved over many years up against a changing food environment in the last 30, 40, 50 years, however long you want to talk about it, where every bit of that food environment is designed for you to eat as much as possible, as often as possible, so that everyone else is working against you and you're putting a lot of faith in your biology, which actually in times gone past would serve you better to acknowledge all of those calories.
Yep.
So there's a mismatch there that I think that we do have to appreciate and that, can sometimes take a more nuanced approach.
Yeah, the whole like intuitive eating argument gets me a little bit too, because I'm like, we can eat intuitively, but we have done a lot of work to count calories, track macros, listen to our body, know what our intolerances are, moderate, like be flexible. Like we've learned how to be rigid before we're flexible. And it's something that I personally feel like all clients need to understand the basics of energy balance, foods like portion sizing, fruit and vegetables, like how to do these basic things that most coaches and personal trainers and nutritionists just take for granted. They think it's intuitive, but it's not. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
It's just layered, learned experience over many, many years. But one thing you mentioned there, I'd love to know, what's your sort of philosophy then around that? Is that okay, well, don't eat this or eat this, have these habits in? Like, how do you sort of approach that if you don't have the whole flexible dieting approach?
Oh, it's not that I don't have the flexible dieting approach. Sorry, just to clarify. It's more that what I think is important to acknowledge is, so if you have a client who's really focused on flexible dieting, but then is also telling you over like certain, longer time frames that you notice like when they trip up and they go outside of their goals or their boundaries, like what are those things? What are those contributing factors? And sometimes it is a particular food environment or things like that. It's like, okay, well, like, do you want to have a different solution to the one you've got now? because I always look at like what's working and what's not.
Yep.
And so a clear example of this is the amount of people that I get coming to me who intermittent fast for weight loss, who are coming to me to lose weight because they're not losing weight, and want me to design it in a way that it includes intermittent fasting because that's best for them for weight loss. And I'm like,
Far out.
It's not working.
what did you just say? Do you not understand that like you're trying a method which isn't really working? And it's not that intermittent fasting can't work.
But you binge it on the
we all know that
weekend.
intermittent fasting can work. It's just a time frame within you consume the calories. But people become so determined to try and fit a round peg into a square hole. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be the way that you do this. You're basically showcasing the fact that it's not working for you, you know? And so I just think that that's an important part to appreciate is like, look, over longer time frames, like what are the gaps, I suppose, that would help from a knowledge perspective that we can fill as coaches to give someone the right set of tools. And it doesn't have to be the same tool. Like you can rotate between things. Like I rotate between like what we would call informed eating, which is basically me having done years and years of like calculating things and weighing things and kind of like knowing the ins and outs of what's good for me and what I do and do not want in the house, you know, to then just kind of go and guesstimate for very long periods of time. And I have a really easy relationship with the scales. So for me, like I can go months on end where I might jump on the scale on a Friday morning and go, oh, I'm half a kilo down. I'll just do this over the weekend and get some extra calories. Or I'm a kilo up. I'll just do this. There's no emotional bias. You know what I mean? I understand weight fluctuations. And so I can deploy a really simple system of like just tweaking a little bit here and there. And I love to get clients to that point where I go like, we don't have you counting macros or counting calories so that you become a calorie counter for life. That's not the goal. Like, I don't think anyone's really sort of saying, hey, you know, when you're 70, aren't we looking forward to bringing out those scales?
Weighing up my puree.
Trying to pour it in with.
But what you're trying to do is just like if we went to if you were having financial problems and you went to a financial planner, what's the first thing that they're going to get you to do? You know, you go, okay, we're going to have a look at the bank balances. We're going to have a look at our income and our expenses. We're going to develop this little thing that no one likes to start with. It's called a budget.
Yep.
But when you're 70, I don't expect you to be coming back and doing this budget. It's the same thing, you know? So, I think just kind of like helping people sort of like get through that phase where they've got that literacy around nutrition and then working with them to develop like, what does it look like beyond that?
Yeah. I love that.
Brilliant.
Informed eating. Not intuitive eating, but informed eating. I've never thought about it like that. Like we are.
Well, that's what we do. It's been 5 years.
It's not
of us
intuitive at
tracking.
all, is it? It's
No,
very
we
well
did the
learned.
homework and practiced the
Yeah,
discipline.
you got to earn the right to do that, right? Like you
Absolutely.
can't just rely on your instinct. It's like you said, you're gonna eat the whole block. There's no way I'm leaving.
Everything's got salts in it.
Reese's
and
peanut butter
sugars
packet
and-
gone. Like I know it's gone though, right? So I know that when I buy it, I'm like, I'm eating all of this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no moderation with this in the house. But then if I don't want it, I won't keep it in the house, right? As you said.
This is exactly what I was talking about. That's a great example of me sort of saying with someone with really high nutrition literacy who, you know within your own framework of what you have, that there are these kind of boundaries.
That's
He's
my
being
favorite.
where you're going, there is this thing or whatever it is that I go, I'm not going to moderate. So you can still choose to have it, right? But you kind of know in your head, like,
That's it.
that that's not the thing that you're going to get disappointed with yourself, if you didn't have like this much of it instead of that much or whatever it is. So
Reese's peanut butter cups.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good though.
I like it.
It's something that a lot of people take for granted. I think, even something I've changed my mind on is that whole relationship with food. Like I would be like, no, we don't want to cut everything out of the house. But I'm like, actually a beginner that's learning to, moderate and practice and build a relationship with food, they can't fucking have trigger foods in the house. Like they need to remove it. And then over time progression is actually reintroducing that where I can now have peanut butter in the house and not have to freeze it. Remember when I went through
Now
that
Luke
step?
gets to eat some of it.
No, he's
before
allergic
you
to
s-
nuts.
Oh.
He'd die. So we can't have that. Oh, don't. We better not. Not moderation. He'd literally be dead. But yes, you've got to earn the right to, build that back up. But it's such a trigger point for so many people because as you said, they're like, oh, why can't I just control? Why can't I just like have one? It's like, like companies, they spend millions of dollars on making things like we want to
Extra
eat them all.
palatable.
Yeah. They put salt in it. They make us really want to finish everything.
Yeah. And by the way, that informed eating, I was given that from Dean and Lizzie. From
No, that's you.
Flex.
No.
Yeah,
they're great. They're great.
Because I was trying to come up with a term for it in a post one day, and Lizzie jumped on and she goes, "Oh, that's informed eating. That's
I
what we
love
teach."
that.
And I was
That's a
like,
really good one. I love it.
I love it too. But yeah, like along the same line as well is like I think a really like a really difficult conversation sometimes with someone who comes to me who wants to really get the most out of their nutrition, but they're on low calories. Is they'll sort of say, "Hey, I really want like to talk about like how do I optimize my diet, this and that, but I want to maintain this like flexibility." And I'm like, "Okay, what am I dealing with here?" And I'm on 1,600 calories. I'm like, "Oh, okay, good start. 1,600.
Nowhere to go.
Who's making a meal plan that's fully sufficient in vitamins and minerals of 1,600 calories? No one. No one is. It's
Really? I would also say 1,600 is not even that low from some of the stuff that you probably see out there, right?
No, it's not. No.
But they wouldn't consider macros, no way.
That's what I'm saying from macros. So what I mean is like vitamin and mineral content. I'm like, you try and hit 100% of the recommended daily intakes or adequate intakes of all your vitamins and minerals of 1,600 calories, and you'll see how insanely hard it is. There is no room for error with like anything you would put into your mouth. And so what does someone on 1,600 calories want though? "Oh, I just want 200 calories, please, at the end of the night so I can have my..."
Little chocolate
Reese's
square or something.
Because that'll keep me
Totally.
consistent. I'm like, "Oh, great." So we took 1,600 calories, down to 1,400 calories. And so we have this expectation, and I'm like, it just doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, it doesn't. So you just kind of have to understand that if the calories are there and the way that works for you is to have 200 calories put aside out of 1,600 so that you can put them towards foods that contribute nothing towards your micronutrient health, that emphasizes you looking at supplementation. Like there's no other way around it, So the only other ways around that are to look at it through the lens of everything I eat. I'm going to be eating for nutrient diversity and quantity at 1,600 calories, or I don't eat 1,600 calories and I eat more. And so that's what I sort of say. I go, the lower the food gets, you have this unfortunate situation where you probably want flexibility more than any other time. And if you really want to hit your micronutrient intake, it's the time not to have flexibility. Okay.
We rarely hear about micronutrients. It's all about if it fits your macros and things. But I love that you're about that, because I feel like most of us, and I don't even know off the top of my head what my values should be, So I feel like there's such a lack of information in the general scheme of things about macros. And I'm sure most of us are quite deficient in many things.
Yeah.
And you'd see that all the time, right?
Yeah, this is whereby like I did a post a long time ago on magnesium. So there's this magnesium bread you can get here in Australia.
Yeah, I swear you're the goat of that. Every time, like Benny's magnesium bread. It actually
Are you going to drop it or
the
what?
Sprout or whatever. You sell it out all the time. We've got to be careful. You know, discount code for that.
Yeah, it's a chickpea loaf. So they use Basan flour. Chickpeas are very high in magnesium, okay? And so this loaf has 660 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams. So 2 slices, you got like the equivalent of 2 scoops of a 300 milligram magnesium powder.
Wow.
Right? It's crazy. There's nothing like it. But I did a post on it because I'd kind of gone through about 10 blood work that week, and 8 of them were deficient in magnesium, right?
Okay.
And some of them were actually, I would say 50% of them were probably supplementing with magnesium as well. But magnesium is pretty hard to get from your diet.
Yep.
But what it really showcases is that a lot of these were coaches, a lot of them were athletes, a lot of them had extreme outputs. Some of them would be going through phases of low calories because of preps and whatever it was, right? And so the point is that your requirement for magnesium is very much based on your individual makeup and your individual kind of like variables, output being one of them, mental stress being another one. And so the intakes recommended by our governing bodies do not take those into consideration. So if you look at the way a lot of those intakes are initially set, it would be sort of based on a 70 kilo, person, for a male, so like a 70 kilo male who's sedentary. That's not reflective of a lot of people. Right?
Free of disease though, right?
So yeah, exactly. And so it's like the minimum amount to get this sort of amount of many people away from like this chronic disease, but it's not necessarily going to be sufficient for a lot of those people. And you'll see it reflected in blood work, and that goes across the board for so many things, whether it's, B vitamin requirements, magnesium, zinc, choline is another really big one.
Where do you get choline?
Eggs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We sorted
Eggs,
with that.
egg yolks,
good
not
with
the
that.
whites. You don't get any.
Oh,
you
yeah, you
get
See, so
barely-
many people cut out the
Bloody
yolks.
throw out the yolks. What's wrong with them? A slap on the face.
She's aggressive.
I can't. You gotta appreciate your eggs. But
yeah,
Look,
wow.
I mean, eggs have had to fight for their life.
I know.
right? Because of
all the good stuff's in the middle.
an interpretation of the data, like over longer time frames, and media kind of getting involved in it too, and then kind of regulatory bodies almost getting involved and really maligning, something like eggs, and then coming out and going, "Oh, hey, turns out."
Sorry, guys.
Eggs are actually not the bad guys
Well, it's the
we
same
thought
with
they
red
were.
meat and everything,
The damage
right?
has been done. Like,
Yeah.
there is-
Yeah.
like it's going to echo into eternity. People kind of questioning, whether or not eggs are a good food choice, or should I get them down to reduce my cholesterol and that kind of thing. So, but they're an extremely good source of choline.
I would love to know, right? Like even going back to the low calories, the deficiencies and everything, what happens when we're deficient in some of these things like magnesium, zinc, or, omegas? Like what happens from like a systemic level, just like an overview, because there's probably lots of little things, but from an overview, if someone's not hitting their micro targets and they're constantly eating 1,600 calories or less and, saving 400 calories for their treat at the end of the day, like what's the consequence of doing that for long periods of times from a deficiency perspective?
Yeah. So I think the challenge is this. So when you look at, if you Google like a magnesium deficiency and stuff like that, what you're going to find is the information that pertains towards a clinical severe magnesium deficiency.
Like
and you're
seizures.
probably not going to see that. What you're going to see is what we would call subclinical stuff going on, meaning towards the low end of the reference range when you look at the reference range next to your blood tests or stuff like that. And the thing is, and this is where a lot of what I do, it's sort of saying, hey, look, these reference ranges that you see on bloods, they refer to population norms. That basically means like the average of everyone that's walking into that pathology right now, do they look like well people or sick people to you?
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably not the average that you want to be aiming for as optimal. Okay, so the average Australian isn't the most healthy, metabolically healthy thing going around.
No.
We're in trouble. This country is in trouble.
Yeah.
And the rates of most diseases and things are skyrocketing. So using reference ranges as your goalposts is setting yourself up potentially for problems, and but those problems do tend to get clinically manifested in medical type issues once they are outside of range. But before you get there, there's so much that could be going wrong. So for instance, take magnesium deficiency, for instance. We know that it's associated with issues with cortisol, poorer vascular tone, and that can sort of influence itself into hypertension and blood pressure issues. The ability to like relax and get to sleep, things to do with the heart and that kind of thing. So a lot of these micronutrient deficiencies can play a huge role in all the systems, whether it's like take fertility that we sort of brought up at the start, so if you go to a fertility clinic, even a very conventional fertility clinic, you can be guaranteed that one of the things that they do is start looking after you with prenatal vitamins. They'll get your omega-3 up. They'll make sure that you're not anemic. They'll make sure that you've got your folate coming in. And they'll also look at like what to remove. So if you go into like, fertility clinics and IVF clinics and stuff like that, you can say goodbye to a lot of things like perfumes and, fragrances and, things that might be going on your skin and things. So that might be controversial in some land. We start talking about detoxification and things like that. But it's interesting when push comes to shove and women are,
Yeah, you'll do what you
well
gotta
within
do.
their right
Totally.
to, want a baby and have been struggling for it. Like these clinics do not stuff around.
Nah.
And so that's where I'm like, success leaves clues. That's not random. That's
That's
there.
like they're optimizing everything. They're not leaving any stone unturned.
Yeah, these aren't the same people that are out there promoting lemon detoxes and
Yeah.
celery
No.
juices and stuff like that, right? Which is where we would go, straight to like throw something at some people saying some weird detoxification things. These are like medical and clinical professionals that understand toxic burden and nutritional sufficiency.
Yep.
We've really got to make sure that both of these things are optimal for one's fertility. This goes for men and women.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a fertility specialist on a couple of times and
And I'm still working with her as my naturopath.
and like some of the things, like she's very cutthroat, but it's very much like this is just what it says and this is what works. And she's got a 100% success rate, right? Of anyone that
Yeah,
comes to her. I
she's
remember her
great.
saying that. And
Kind of scared our listeners
kind
a
of
little
scared
bit
me.
though.
I was like, fucking throw everything out. Throw my whole body out, my
Plastics
carcass.
gone.
But, if you're running into issues, and everyone's got their limiting factors. Like what you might get away with, someone else might not, So we've all got our things. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, make sure that you take a screenshot, upload it to your socials, and don't forget to tag us. One thing I'd love to ask you about is, what do you think's going on with people that are constantly dieting on 1,200, 1,600, 1,500 calories? Like these low calorie numbers, and they're constantly like, I want to say like yo-yo dieting, but it's sort of disguised as like cutting and bulking and like Fitspo to try and stay lean. Like, don't you think though, like, is there something like from a micronutrient level of like, something's not right here? Like if you're not losing fat on 1,500 calories, something's going wrong?
So you mean in terms of results?
Yeah,
So,
like if someone's constantly like, sort of like going on low calories and they're not getting the results, obviously there could be a compliance issue, but could anything else be going on for people constantly having to do this, of spending too much time on these low calorie numbers?
Yeah, I mean, like it's still, to me, it's still kind of like looking at the low hanging fruit first and foremost. I think sometimes when you get a client like that, they're probably the ones that you would be keeping an extra eye on to make sure that like what they say is getting done is getting done.
Yeah, that's true.
All of us have been caught out by that before, which is why also, you'll have hardcore calories in, calories out conversations happening on social media until social media dies, because it's relevant. Like a lot of people, like it's human nature. People vastly underestimate the amount of food they intake. You know what I mean? But people can become very emotionally biased towards that actually happening when, they're suffering from confidence issues as it is. There's a lot of letdown, and then all of a sudden to be having to be pulled up on it. That like, well, are you really doing what you say you're doing?
Yep.
And with the all or nothing kind of principle, like that lends itself to me to some pretty exaggerated kind of caloric intakes happening on the back end. And what I mean by that is, take someone who eats well Monday through Friday and then kind of goes, I balance on the weekends though. It's like, yep. I know what that looks like.
I intuitively on the weekend.
There it is.
Yeah, I know what that looks like. And I can tell you probably of the last 3 people that I'm like, look, we're going to audit the weekends.
Oh, no, I don't track
Right?
on the weekends.
And all of a sudden, someone who's eating exactly 1,800 calories on the weekend, and you get these messages on a Sunday going, oh my God, I had 4,500 calories on Friday. I had 4,000 on Saturday. And I'm like, yeah, this is what happens. You think that that's hard to eat. Like that's easy. That's easy for people, much, much easier than what people give it credit for, particularly after you've like kind of restrained yourself like through the week in a decent calorie deficit. Like you have all of these adaptations, these hormones and cues and cravings and things that are taking place to do what they're supposed to do, which is to get back to equilibrium. And so it doesn't feel like it though, because the effort that you put in for like 80% of the week in your eyes weighs so much more than the little bit of freedom that you had over the 48 hours and bang, it's gone and it's Monday again and you're back into it.
Yep.
And it just feels really unfair and sets people up for that cycle. But back to your question. So I do think there's some other things that, make up or encompass weight loss. So you'll have, it's a spectrum, of like basal metabolic rate and things like that. And unfortunately, some people have a really low basal metabolic rate, and they're just on that end of the spectrum. I think certain medications I've struggled with more than what I am led to believe in the literature as well. And that's more of a
like down-regulating people's metabolisms? Is that what you mean?
Just affecting things, you know what I mean? So like antidepressants sometimes in some people I find more problematic than what I expect. Certain heart medications, things that are kind of like altering, aspects of the heart or things like that. An interesting one is the microbiome. So that plays a really big role as well. So I put out a post earlier this year. There was a study done in February on an intervention of fiber, but a particular type of fiber called resistant starch. And this is bending calories in, calories out as far as you could possibly bend it, because it blows your mind in that like they put 2 groups on the same amount of calories. It was like 1,600 calories or something like that on average. But that worked out at maintenance, so the smaller people were on a little bit less, the larger people were on a little bit more. Same calories though, and all they did was give one of the groups 40 grams of resistant starch, which is a type of fiber, as part of their calories. And over 8 weeks, the resistant starch group lost over 2 kilograms. The control group lost nothing. So the placebo group, as we expect to maintain, nothing changed.
Yeah.
The intervention group, even though they ate the same calories, dropped over 2 kilos of body weight, 5 centimeters of circumference off their belly, and most of the body weight was from fat. I think it was like 1.8 kilos. But in 8 weeks, okay, you do the math on that as fat loss, and most of us would be kind of happy with that over, you wouldn't be unhappy with 1.8 kilos of pure fat if you would put someone even in a modest deficit, let alone maintenance.
Yeah.
And these are untrained people, so I was like, that is amazing. And that really goes to highlight, like the authors basically think, like, look, it's got something to do with the microbiome shift that occurs, through that. They measured all the different parts of the microbiome and some of the postbiotics, so the things that the bacteria produce as well. But what it goes to show you is within this thing we call metabolism, there is a lot of things moving and going on, that we don't fully appreciate all the time.
Do we digest resistant starch? Sorry, just back on that variable.
We don't, but the bacteria do.
They eat it.
Okay.
So they.
So it's good.
So they're
to
eating our
consume.
calories.
They are eating our calories, right? Well, that's
Does
kind
that
of like
make
what's
them
happening
deficient
with
though,
fiber.
because they lost weight, or does that nourish us? Is it a good thing or a bad thing, the weight loss that occurred, sort of?
Oh, I would say it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Like they had the weight to lose.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is this the whole rice argument? Right, this is cooling your rice, right? That's how we turn
this rabbit hole.
Yeah, honestly, I've been in trouble on the internet for even speaking about this because apparently I'm wrong. So I got Benny here. Check this up. Because if you cool your rice, right, it converts the starch to non-resistant starch, right? And then the calories don't count in a sense, right? Like not all calories are created equal. Is that right?
To a degree, yeah. So you're correct. So like if you cook like rice and tubers like potatoes and things are a good example of this. You cook them, you let them cool for 24 hours. A certain amount, it's not actually a lot, but a certain amount of the starch will be converted into this fiber called resistant starch. Now, by the sheer fact of doing that, you have sort of altered the caloric amount a little bit. But what we saw in the study that I mentioned in February is that if you give enough of that resistant starch, to a group, the changes in fat loss is staggering. Like that's very significant. And so this is a type of trial that you go, we need to see more evidence. We want to see bigger groups. We want to see it repeated. But mechanistically, it kind of makes sense. And also we kind of have some animal data that lines up with that as well. We know the significance of like an obese person's microbiome and a healthy weight person's microbiome are completely different. And if you take rats and you put the obese rat's microbiome in the lean one, they get obese.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean?
Really? That's so interesting.
At a rate that is not fully explained by like the changes in their calories that they consume and stuff like that. And this is what I mean. It's not to say that calories in, calories out doesn't work. It's just to say that there is a lot of bending like within that you just have to appreciate. And so back to the question about like stubborn fat loss clients, I'm like, unfortunately, some people are just gonna have to eat much less than other people. That's why I've never, ever enjoyed posts of, like I could put up posts of my bikini girls eating 3,500 calories as well. You know what I mean? But do I think that that's a net positive on most women's mental health?
No way.
I hate that.
So
They're like,
unrelatable.
that's going so well. It's like, you know what you're doing, don't you?
It's like such an easy brag point as a coach to take a client that can eat so much food that's getting shredded.
And then pretend like it's your methods that's doing that. Not their metabolism that they were born with. Fucking kills me too.
Exactly. I mean, like we all get those freaks.
They're still hungry. Do you know what I mean? Like on a 20% deficit. Like it's still the same. It's all relative. It's easier for them to get the micros in, right?
It is. Yeah. But like my point is that like I don't enjoy like taking an exception to the rule like that and showcasing it under the pretense that either you're the one that's like really responsible for that person's metabolism. Or that's somehow reflective of all of the clients that you work with. Right?
Because I'm like, all my bikini girls are
that is all
3,000.
Smoke and mirrors. Tell us about the other 99% of your clients.
That's so true.
So,
you do see it, don't you?
We do, but I just do not enjoy that type of post, that kind of misperception as much. But on the opposite extreme of it is what you have is the client that's the opposite of that. And it's like, damn, these calories are going to get really low.
Yep.
You know, the next question that it follows on from that is there things that you could do about that? And I think that is the question on everyone's lips if you're in that position, you know, because that feels horrible to have to diet off so low. And I do think that there are some subtle things, but none that have been like well qualified through enough evidence to, you know, make them into like a standard procedure and things like that. But I do think getting a healthy gut, I do think making sure that you have low inflammation, controlling stress, controlling sleep. These are all the foundational principles that every single coach should be teaching anyway. But within those, there's little bits already that we know. So we know if you take clients who sleep 5 hours and 8 hours and you put them into a deficit and they lose weight, that the clients that sleep 8 hours are probably going to lose 80% fat and 20% muscle. The clients that sleep 5 hours, it's reversed. They lose 80% muscle and 20% fat. Okay? That is horrific outcome for your dieting efforts.
We're SOS.
Imagine going through all of the training, all of the nutrition, everything that the coach is asking and not sleeping and getting that result versus this person. I mean, who would you rather be? And my point is that these little things I think can add up to make a significant contribution in what feels like the requirement for a lower caloric intake needed to get the result demanded. So.
Yeah. I think more people need to hear that. Like, you can't outwork a shitty lifestyle, you know, like you still got to have the pillars. And it's even like our competing days is one of the things that like I'm grateful for, is that I could taught you like the importance of sleep hygiene and accuracy and how important those things are. And I think a lot of people, you know, like of course that's one lifestyle, but it sort of comes over and it's like the little things they do compound and they do add up. And, you know, as you said, success leaves clues, and we do have to put our weight and our value as coaches as well into things like sleep and stress management and consistency and, you know, tracking on the weekends and doing the basic shit that most people are like, oh, that's so simple. It's like, yeah, because it works and you're still not doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, we still need to put our weight on those things rather than all the micro things all of the time, because they're still important, of course, but sometimes if you cover your basis with your lifestyle, you'll probably be pleasantly surprised that you'll tick off a lot of those areas as well.
Yeah. 100% agree with you. And it's a conversation, as you can imagine, the type of client that usually comes to me now is highly motivated to improve those nuances of their health. And I enjoy that because, you know, people sort of say to me, oh, do you still deal with this and that? And, you know, some of the more Gen Poppy type things, I'm like, oh, not really anymore.
How good?
Because most of the people that reach out to me are really motivated, you know, to improve their health. A lot of them in a really bad way, and it's been for a long time. And there's a lot of baggage and history that does come with that I've got to appreciate. Some of it's pretty heavy, but to think that they're going to half-ass it is generally not on my radar anymore, you know. And so that does mean that I get the liberty sometimes to enjoy some of these more nuanced things that I might do with my experience, but it's never at the behest of the foundations.
No.
It's never a replacement for them, you know? And sometimes I find myself, I go, oh, hey, I know you reached out for Benny the biochemist, but you're getting Benny the behaviorist. because you don't need biochem right now. You need some significant changes to do the shit that you need to do. And that's
it's so true. And look, I made this mistake early in my coaching career of like, I thought, oh, coaches, they've got it together. They got personal trainers. They got this. They don't need me to be the behavioralist. They don't need me to tell them tick the boxes. Boy, was I wrong. A lot of coaches, they still need that accountability, and they still need like, you know, they still need someone to say, hey, like, get your sleep in, or like, make sure you're tracking your fiber too, or like, you know, eat some bloody fruit. Like, they still need people on the other side to do those pieces, but often they're the ones that want the nuance. They're like, oh, tell me like what's wrong with my bloods. It's like, no. Fucking get 7 hours sleep, right? Like, they're worrying about those little things. I don't know if that's something you notice, but, you know, with our coaches, sometimes I've got to remove my bias of being a coach and being like, coaches still need coaches. They still need coaching.
Absolutely. And I think the same actually goes for a lot of health professionals that aren't coaches as well. You know, I think that there's so many amazing people that, you know, work in, you know, whether it's nutrition or physiotherapy or even doctors and things like that. But I think there's something to be said for having, if you work in the patient or client care industry, I think that a lot of the people you work with take up a certain amount of space, you know, like in your mind. You're constantly thinking about like ways to improve them, no matter what your the way that you do that is. And I think that can take away from the time that you might internally reflect about your own goals and health issues and things like that. And it's like, sort of almost putting yourself last, in a lot of time. And
Definitely.
so, or just like not having the space left to then decide on like, oh, I just don't even know the strategies I want to use for myself. I can't look at myself objectively. And I think all coaches are sort of privy to that paralysis through analysis by like, you're learning so much and you want to implement so many things. And you go, I can't stick to one thing because I'm second guessing myself on this or that, so having that third party or having another coach or whatever it is, like to allow you to just go, you know what, I just want you to I want to delegate this out to you because I have all of these other people, my clients or my patients that I need to focus on. There's something to be said for that. And I think that's great.
Yep.
We talk about that a lot in a sense. And even with my own journey trying to get blood work from a GP, and it's kind of a double-edged sword because you go to these figures for advice on health and wellness and things, but then even myself, I walk in the office and I look at them and I go, wow, you do not depict health in at all. Yet I'm supposed to go to you for guidance. And even just, you mentioned blood work and things like, and I needed Sherelle's help when I had to get a simple blood test, 3-4 years ago. I go, Sherelle, they keep knocking me back. Like, people don't really encourage blood work and things. So I would love just to ask your opinion on, for someone like me, even who works in this industry, having my confidence knocked back all those years ago, how does a normal everyday population person go and try and get some blood work, or where do they begin? Aside from coming to you, obviously, but where do you get your research? Where do you get your guidance on that? Because it is a bit of a harsh world out there with that stuff.
It is so hard. Like, and I think you've got to understand the medical model as well, though. And I've had like lots of conversations with different doctors to ask them their experience of it, and also get some insights. Which are kind of more, hey, here's the real reason, like why we're not doing this and stuff. And it's like, okay, I'm like glad you're transparent, but that doesn't come across to every patient.
No.
And I can understand that they also are in a model it's very high turnover, like it's very short appointments for a lot of these things. And they undoubtedly do probably get a lot of requests that are just, kind of worth shaking your head at. We all do in every profession, right? But there are some legitimate concerns that I think what we want to sort of focus on, which is like when you've got a right to, want to be able to look into something and you've got some issues going on. And sometimes, as a otherwise healthy young female or male, it's very easy for them to sort of say, look, you don't need these tests. What do you need these tests for?
Yeah.
The average person walking in here is, 70, morbidly obese, they're on 5 medications.
You look great.
Like, why am I going to do blood tests for you? Because their purpose is kind of like, probably in their eyes, different as to what they see what you're asking. You know what I mean? And so you're not in chronic disease yet, or anything like that. But the point is, it's like not necessarily the model to keep you out of it. We all know that. We're in health and fitness coaches, right? Our goal is to have people not need to go to a doctor, when it's too late. Going back to what I said before, though, we live in a country and in a time which is, it's so much easier to get testing done yourself now. So you actually don't have to kind of rely upon it as much. And further, we're in telehealth consultations now. So I have people sort of say to me, oh, do you have a really good doctor in Brisbane? I go, you don't need a really good doctor in Brisbane. I've got a really good doctor down here that you can telehealth.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's cool. Good to know.
But 5 years ago, before that was really as big as it is now, it was really problematic. I'd be like, I need a doctor in Perth. Or, I need a doctor in Gold Coast.
And you never know who you're going to get as well when you walk in. You're like, God, I hope he's happy today. Like, give me the slip.
Yeah, but I'm trying to set up clients, what I mean, here, there, and everywhere.
Sure.
But now, as far as within Australia at least, I'm like, doesn't matter where you are.
Yep.
I've got doctors who I know are really good, and I just telehealth appointment them these days. But further than that, there's private commercialized companies that you can go with now without needing a doctor's referral. So you can jump onto, these platforms, they've got different packages, or sort of like you can build out your own packages and you'll pay for them.
What do you think of those? Because they're really, like, I've seen them a lot, like with blood work and gut health and things like that. And part of me is like, geez, I just don't even know if people know what they need. You know what I mean? Like,
That's
how
the
do you
hard
know,
part.
like, how would you know what panels or what blood tests you need? And I just think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but, is it worth someone just going and finding a coach like yourself and then maybe getting someone to do that back and forth because it might save you money in the long run? I'm not sure. Or is it, as you said, doing your own research and just figuring it out on your own? You know, I feel like the latter is tricky.
It is tricky. I think, like, if you were to ask the average GP this, they're probably going to be not in a lot of favor of it. Okay, because they're like, oh, well, you know, what's the average person going to be able to look at their bloods and tell?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
which is
that's
true to a
true.
degree. Like,
Yeah,
it's true.
They're like, okay, no,
Someone wrote that on a review on our
Yeah,
podcast
but
for giving out that advice, remember?
fuck that.
The counter argument,
Hope you're listening.
yeah,
She's not.
the counter argument would be that a lot of patients feel like that's what their doctors do anyway.
Yeah.
Just look at them and go,
Literally.
You know, like that's a lot of people's experience at the end of the day. But look, these companies are legal entities going through, you know, valid clinical labs here in Australia. So there's nothing grey about it whatsoever. To your point about like how would people know what to get, that is a little bit hard. So that's, for instance, why I do an inquiry call.
Yes.
You know, it's like people sort of say, oh, hey, can I get some bloods done and have you look at them through the lens that you do? I'm like, yeah, you know, tell me a bit about what's going on and I'll just have a think about what I think might be useful for you. And, you know, it comes back to that conversation about not spending too much or not looking at things that are probably going to be irrelevant to you. And then if a further testing is needed after that initial appointment, you've got like the full, you know, appointment's worth of information alongside that initial blood work that help you then decide what that should look like, you know. So that's important. But yeah, it's very easy to jump online, order your own tests. You pay for them. You don't need a referral. You go down to the pathology. You get them tested. They email you back the results. So you
don't have to go through a third party or anything. That's so good.
Exactly. And so that's why 90% of my clients use iMedical or iScreen, you know, one of these platforms here in Australia. It's because when you add up one doctor's appointment, which the costs of many of them have gone up 2 to 4 times over the last 18 months.
Yeah, they have.
Right? Many doctors aren't bulk billing anymore as well. There's a bit of notoriety around doctors being late to appointments, you know, so you might have to take a certain amount of time off work.
And that's
Take the
times
day off,
money.
right?
Times money, isn't it? Exactly. Add it all up.
This is exactly my point about people paying for their tests. Because initially I was a little bit too conservative and I'm like, oh, hey, try your doctor first and here's the wish list. Here's what you should probably go in and say, you know, so that they don't, you know, there's a valid reason for looking at why you know, wanting to get these tested. But then after getting so many problems, you just realize you're like, wow, this is very unfortunate because you're wasting people's time. And I went to 2 different doctors. They've taken time off work twice to get nowhere.
Yeah, that
you know?
sucks, doesn't it?
And so now they've lost the productivity hours.
Yeah.
You know, there's the mental frustration from that happening. And then, you know, let's say third time round, they get the bloods or some of it. And then they've got to go in and get another appointment for the doctor to tell them everything's fine. Like charge you to tell you everything's fine.
And I'm like,
get
give me a copy, doc. Give me the copy.
Or you get a phone call, everything's fine. Can I have a copy? Oh, no, you can't have a copy. And it's like,
so annoying.
why is this actually so hard? Like, because this should not be this hard. We won't be long, in my opinion, before we're the next step from like these platforms like iMedical and iScreen, and you'll just be able to do them in your own house.
Great. We need it. I reckon.
That's
you won't have to leave
interesting.
home.
Venipuncture at home.
How do you do that? What would that-
Venipuncture at home. People just be,
they'd come to you.
you'll just-
they'll come to you.
No, they already do that.
Wait,
No, there will be devices that get made that will interpret your blood at home.
Wow.
but do you have to prick your own blood type thing
Yep.
and draw vials?
You probably won't
Nah,
draw
maybe
vials.
we like a prick test.
They'll do like a
Just
prick
cannulate
test.
yourself.
Yeah. They won't do that.
Oh, that'd
But
be
It's
good.
coming. It's coming. Like
Yeah,
fertility
100%.
test kits now. You can do
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah.
You
So
don't need to
good.
send out anymore.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You buy
Okay.
the little microscope, the cartridges, put them in, connects the
Yeah.
app to your phone. You've got your semen analysis on your phone.
Yeah, wow.
Algorithm interprets
Yep.
it, gives you the quantities.
You'll love this one, Ben.
So-
I saw the other day on this tech, I don't know, show. It was like this toilet seat. I don't know if you've seen this. And the toilet seat has this built-in urine analysis. And it syncs to your phone. So it does a full ward test or a urine analysis when you go to the toilet. It tells you when you're ovulating and all those things.
Yep.
So it was this guy, they did a great commercial about it. It was this guy telling that his wife was pregnant and knew before she did. He was like, fuck, she's pregnant. And I was like, that's the future, isn't it? I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I think
But that's
it's
what I
great.
mean about like exactly, like we are not far away from you not having to leave your house to get, you know, to know your bloods and
Yep.
to get reports from it too.
Okay.
Do you know what I
Hanging
mean?
out for it.
It's good to know.
You know, like people that come to me to do what I am now, like I'm fully aware that you give it enough time, that makes me obsolete in a certain regard. And as I sort of say, like the aspect of coaching, when we think about like AI coaching and apps and things like that, I go, there is always, like in my opinion, still going to be a place in the foreseeable future for coaching, because people already kind of know what to do and don't do it anyway. A lot of the coaching experience is the accountability, the psychology that comes along with the principles and methods that you kind of own and problem solve, and I don't think a lot of people are not going to get that same experience digitally.
No, and human connection, we want to bond with people.
100%.
So iMedical, the two platforms, just to let people know.
But there's iMedical, there's iScreen. There are a couple of bigger ones here in Australia.
Okay, good to know for people.
Great.
Beautiful.
I'd love to ask you about men's fertility, Ben. I was like, oh no. As a father of 3, I feel like you're very expertised in this at the moment.
Winning so far.
Winning. But fertility is obviously such a big conversation in women at the moment. And we've had, a couple of experts on the show in the past, and, like we've shared a little bit about stories around IVF and just discussed it in general. And women's fertility is obviously such a big topic at the moment, but men's fertility is like rarely ever spoken about. In fact, I actually don't know if I've ever really listened to any podcast or read any books or seen much around men's fertility, but I'm very much aware that, pregnancy is a team sport. You need one and the other. It's not, but the infertility is just thrown on the woman all the time. It's like, oh, you're infertile, and most people don't look at the man, the sperm health or anything like that. So I'd love to hear, like, this is obviously something that your expertise lies in. I'd love to hear, like, what's your thoughts around men's fertility, and if we were going to support our partners, Paul and Luke, listen to this, what could we tell them to help them prioritize their sperm health and, chances of conception in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and male fertility or infertility is a very big contributing factor towards couples, with issues. It's a very it's a very significant percentage, and we are in an age, now where these sperm rates are in free fall. So it's like sperm count has just like dropped off a cliff, and unfortunately, it's accelerating. So it's not even like it's like kind of dropped off a cliff a while back and petering out. We're actually on the acceleration phase.
Why is that?
Look, I mean, I would consider it to be a multitude of factors. I think, some of the biggest ones are the fact that we are probably exposed to things that are really like a toxic burden on our
like
insides.
Plastics and
plastics and heavy metals and kind of just things that accumulate. Oxidative stress and inflammation, so that's a big topic there. But basically, if you think of that like the little wear and tears, the oxidative stress and inflammation, they kind of go together. But they will have a very dramatic role on the fertility of both men and women. And semen is very vulnerable to oxidative stress. Okay, so if you were to Google right now and you Google what is some good sperm supplements or sperm nutrients, you're going to come up with a list of things and a lot of them you're going to realize sort of help as antioxidants, okay? And that's basically the role of, making sure that we don't have too much oxidative stress, okay? But I do think that, like, just generally speaking, we're a nation now heading towards more metabolic dysfunction. So that's the ability, like, we don't use our fuels well. We've got, like, poorer glucose control. We've got poorer lipids and cholesterol. We've got, worse hypertension and things like that. All of these contribute towards, a negative health outcomes, like pretty much universally. And the reproductive system, does not escape that. I think sedentary lifestyles is a really big factor. So the testicles hang outside the body. They're supposed to be a little bit cooler. We wear, briefs or jocks or something that can like really like kind of tuck you up there and kind of increase the temperature. We are fully clothed, we're sitting down, much more often. And so being seated for extended periods of time warms up the pelvic region like nothing else, way more than what people would expect. And even a 1 degree shift in temperature of the testicles is enough to make very significant changes to semen characteristics for longer time frames. And what I mean by that is you don't have to be worried about like sitting here doing a podcast. Okay?
Get up there.
I'll get up soon.
You're around. Jeez.
This can be my conception for now. But what I mean by that is as a career choice and things, so for men that are now, we're seated, we're in heated rooms all the time, possibly. So, you
Yeah.
know, there's a temperature problem that can contribute towards semen health. So I think that's a really big problem.
I've seen a couple of posts that you've done around that of like, you know, working from home and, you know, and I've done that with my partner. I'm like, go walk, like, get up, walk around, you know, stop wearing tight clothes. Because it's those little things that you would never think about it, right? Like you never think, a guy would never think about it, to be honest. They just, I don't know, unless you know how you're going to know, because we're sort of a bit more educated on what helps us be more fertile. Whereas I feel like a lot of guys aren't. If I asked my partner, how are you going to improve sperm quality, he would have no idea besides stay healthy and fit, which is still, of course, important, but the little things, right?
What does that even mean,
I
healthy
know,
and fit?
but that's
you
what
know?
comes up on Google, exercise. You're like, great, fucking advice.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think the lion's share of the results is not rocket science. It is those fundamentals.
Yep.
You know, where I think it becomes more important is for sometimes a man can end up doing a series of negative things unknowingly. You know, like you do have a sedentary job. You're at a computer all day long. You know, you have tight underwear. You feel the cold a lot, so you keep the temperature blasting like all day long. Perhaps you know, eat a little bit unhealthy on the weekends, and you know, but more so than you really should. Perhaps there's a lack of fresh produce, you know, that sort of contributes towards, you know, that antioxidant status and things like that too. So I think that's a really important place to start. And then within that, like I've sort of been quite vocal about the different kind of supplemental interventions that you can do. And there's drug-based interventions you can do as well. So there's drugs and natural supplements that have some pretty crazy results. Like CoQ10, I found a study earlier this year, and CoQ10 is really well studied with semen health and female fertility. But where 600 milligrams, which is a high dose of CoQ10, for 12 months, not only like it kind of like doubled like the semen parameters, but these were for men with low sperm counts. So I'm like, if you have really good sperm counts, don't expect doubling, because it's not probably as likely, you know, if you're already in a good spot. But the benefits of the CoQ10 remained a year after discontinuation, which just blew my mind, because you don't see that with many things at all. Like there's barely any instances that I can really remember in the like supplement trials are generally short term. You know what I mean? It's hard to do a trial for longer than 3 months, 6 months, maybe. 12 months is a really long one. But yeah, you don't, if they do a follow-up, you generally see like a return to baseline. You go, oh yeah, it was good while you were using it, and then you stopped, and it was like, things don't generally stick. It's only one pill after all. Like this is why it's important to do all these other health things. CoQ10 astounded me, you know, from a men's semen health perspective, you know, for a year after discontinuation to have such amazing sperm characteristics.
Yeah,
That's good to know, because you hear about zinc and things like that, but obviously this surpasses that by a mile.
They're all important in their own right. Zinc has a lot of really important aspects in conception itself. You know what I mean? So in that fertilization process, zinc is really important. But yeah, zinc, selenium, omega-3, so the good fat that you'll find in fatty fish and things like that, that's something to focus on too. There is some interesting amino acids like N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. Glutathione is our master antioxidant internally. So N-acetylcysteine helps you create that glutathione, and that glutathione protects your semen, and that's led to more positive outcomes as well. Black seed oil that I use a lot for various health conditions, I suppose you could say, is very good for semen characteristics too. So there's definitely some like little add-ons that you could look at if you were really trying to optimize sperm health. And the time frame that's important, well, you can argue this because kind of like the longer the better. You know, you don't want to hold off on things like diet. You know, if you're planning to conceive in 12 months and he's going to like go, oh, so when do I have to start eating healthy?
Yeah,
it's
literally.
Like, just start now.
Fucking now.
Just start now. You know, so, but I do think, I'll say this anyway, but I don't want to take away from what I just said, but a men to restore optimal sperm function is much quicker, in my experience, than to really look at what you need to do for a women's reproductive system. It's so much more complex. There's so many more things going on. So I do think men are very fortunate in that way. And that's because I deal with a lot of men who come to me.
What's the turnaround time, do you think? Like 3 months?
Less, like
Really?
60 to 90 days.
Yeah, wow. There you go. Because I can't remember what a female egg was. I thought that was 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
But then, it's sort of like, do you ovulate every cycle? There's so many more factors, as you said. But that's
Exactly.
interesting.
What about us who are dating bodybuilders who are on non-natural supplements? Obviously, we've got our plan, but we've got a lot of females listening, and we are in the fitness industry, and a lot of us are dating bodybuilders. So what do the use of, we'll call them non-natural supplements or PEDs, do on sperm? And then how do two people try and start their family planning? Because, to come off cycles and things, it's not that easy. There's a lot involved emotionally and hormonally. Like, how do people go about it?
It's a big part of what I do.
Yeah,
like
cool.
This is I get so many men who reach out to me, and these are men who won't go to the doctors very easily. You know what I mean? Because there is such a stigma around whether it's HRT or kind of like self HRT or actual steroid use, which is amounts of anabolics that are higher than what you would call a hormone replacement therapy. And if you look at some of the reports that have been done surveying doctors on their confidence on engaging in those discussions, it's really low.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
most doctors basically put their hands up and say, I wouldn't even start that conversation. I wouldn't even know where to go to talk to someone about that. And I find that interesting because it's a little bit different than what we see with what we'd probably call recreational drugs or pain-killing addictions and things like that. But anyway, nonetheless, it's just there's a stigma. It often leads to a lot of bodybuilders or steroid users kind of stuck, kind of going, I really don't know who to reach out here and who's actually legitimately going to help me because, maybe they are concerned about coming off. It can be like a very, like in my opinion, it's probably, as a man saying this, I realize the limitations, but it's probably the closest thing a man can get to having like the come down, heading into a bleed in a menstrual cycle for a woman where you're having that loss of hormones or somewhere in, perimenopause and menopause. Like it's probably somewhat of a similar, I don't know the magnitude, but a similar type feeling. And so that's important to recognize, but being on testosterone therapy within probably 12 weeks or so will tend to make a male infertile.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yep. So around about that 12-week mark on average. And the turnaround time, in other words, like a discontinuation and, when are we fertile after that point, it's usually by about 6 months. It's around about 67% of men are fertile again. And by fertile...
How long did you say?
By 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah,
Yep.
so
That's a long time.
It is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly of going through those lows hormonally.
100%. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't realize it made a man infertile because I'm sure there's a lot of people out
Really?
there trying to get. Would there be men that didn't know that? Or do you feel like most guys that would be taking performance enhancing drugs would be aware that it makes them infertile?
It's a hard question because, again, I have a bias of the type of man that comes to me. He kind of does know that. He's probably like interested in facts like that first. But there are exceptions. I've had clients, make their missus fall pregnant whilst running several
you
times
still
more
can
drugs
fall
than
pregnant.
hormone replacement therapy. So
That's true, yeah.
there are
still
exceptions
can.
to that rule. But on average, if we look at the data, there's probably around about 2/3 of men by about 6 months, 80 to 90% by 12 months, and basically 100% by 2 years. Okay. And that's just coming off without the assistance of certain opportunities that you have available to you. So for instance, and this kind of falls back into the fertility realm, world, is that you can use certain fertility drugs to try and like restart those systems quicker.
Interesting.
You can use hormone HCG, hormone gonadotropin. You can use HMG, which is sort of a mimicker of follicular stimulating hormone, which helps us with our spermatogenesis. There's Clomid. So there's all these different types of drugs that may or may not be open to men getting access to through the system, as well as just in their own hands as well. And then you can look at whether or not that's going to help it come back quicker. And in my experience, like there's definitely something to be said by the incorporation of some of these post-cycle therapy drugs and enabling that process a little bit quicker. There are men who can concurrently run some fertility therapy alongside their testosterone therapy and maintain their fertility as well. Okay, so depending on the man, you might run some HCG at the same time as testosterone and be able to have enough viable sperm, to be considered, somewhat fertile again as well. So there's a few different options there. But yeah, the men that I work with, I sort of explain the time frames, because that's, and then the risks that you have as well. So here's the thing is like a lot of men would love to stay on their testosterone therapy, throw drugs, throw supplements, and then be guaranteed, because again, time, effort, money, right? A lot of those go into that situation. And, I can only speak from my own experience of observation with that. I would say that it's definitely not successful every time. And so the question I'm often asked from a man who doesn't want to come off his testosterone therapy, if I say to them, listen, I've had men at the 8-week mark or the 12-week mark, show zero improvements, and then decide to come off the testosterone therapy, realizing, what, time is of the essence here because, you can only ask your partner to, wait, whatever that conversation looks like with the partner, because that's important when it comes to time. They'll come off and then they'll ask me, but what happens if they kept going? And I'm like, I don't have the answer to that. And I go, do you want to know why I don't have the answer to that? Because every single male that I've worked with who's tried to do a concurrent fertility therapy with a testosterone therapy and not gotten anywhere in 8 to 12 weeks has come off.
Yeah.
Every single one. Right. So I don't have an answer to like, if they just kept going, like what would those stats look like then?
Yeah.
And I just think that's a reflection of like reality, is like, I think when push comes to shove, it's like, what is your risk tolerance, for this not working out for you? And most men are probably going to say, probably a couple of months. And then if I don't see anything, I'm going to come off completely and then go from there.
Yep, and that's only 50% of the equation, right? The female's
so
still
many
got
variables.
Why is getting pregnant so hard? I just feel like so many discussions you only have when you're 30, right? Rather than like learning all these things, obviously, when you're a bit younger. But the men's fertility discussion, I feel like it's going to become more prevalent, more popular, more people are going to become aware of it.
It's hard though when you're talking about these kind of substances.
100%.
Where do you get your advice? And you got to be careful with what you say and all that. So I feel like there will still be hurdles for a lot of guys and women, So it's where can someone get information to like
Ben?
Obviously we're gonna fill his books are probably already full, but where else can someone, even like a young 16-year-old male wants to start a cycle, things like that, where do they even go for any advice?
It's a really hard question.
Yeah.
So I mean, I won't mention like individual names on here, but like there are people out there across the globe who are better, at having that discussion, and that's one of the things that like I've found a lot of solace in, like what I do, and this was even in my days of working with mainly competitors, is that I would have certain younger men approach me wanting to do something, wanting to start something, or wanting to use amounts of things that were just, in my eyes, someone I wouldn't work with. And I was never one to kind of like cave on my boundaries.
Yep.
And I was just sort of say, listen, I'm just giving you came to me and you're either doing a free call or we're working together and you're paying me for my thoughts and my expertise. And I'm telling you, I don't think you should do this. For these reasons, I don't think you're a good candidate for this. I don't think this. I think you're looking at this through the eyes of a 22-year-old male, and you're speaking to someone who's basically double your age, and there's like a certain amount of wisdom that I'm hoping to impart upon you. And you don't have to listen. That's fine. But like, I don't have to bend either. So I've always kind of played it like that. And that's why I've had plenty of young clients walk away from me in my bodybuilding, client days, I suppose, because they would go to guys who would
give them what they wanted.
Like, tell them different,
that's not
use
coaching,
different
is
stuff,
it?
and that's fine. I think it's just like, I'm trying to blend two worlds here, and for me, I've always been like, I was in health industry first. And so anything that's along the lines of a performance enhancing drug perspective, I get it. I totally get it, but I'm just a very conservative kind of person by nature, and that is going to come out in the types of discussions I have with people. So when to come back to that question about where can they go, I think it's just about trying to find the right person that's going to have that conversation straight up with them. So many young men think that they're going to do a cycle of steroids and look somewhat like their influences alike, and then they get to stop doing the cycle of steroids and stay like that. Right? And I'm like, I'm going to show you a very quick lesson in reality, and you can look up any former IFBB Mr. Olympia, the best in the world, and see what they look like now. Right? And you will see all of them are, they are nothing compared to their former selves, because you know, they're men in their 50s and 60s and stuff like that now, that you can fully appreciate that, like, health comes into it, and you know that what they were doing through that whole time frame that's not congruent with, you know, optimal lifespan and health.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think once you give men that reality, they can kind of go, oh, so you're basically, I'm marrying that. I'm like, that's basically what you're doing.
That's
you're
your life.
marrying it.
Yep.
You're gonna marry it, you know, and it's a big boy discussion. You know, you're gonna make big boy decisions right now.
Yeah, that's true.
It is so true. But that's one of the things I really appreciate about you, Ben, as well, is like you've got that health, longevity mentality towards your coaching practice as well. And that's so important, because like anyone that's getting a coach, looking for a coach, like that's so hard to find. It shouldn't be, but someone that actually cares about your long-term physical and mental health and you in 10 years' time, it shouldn't be hard to come by, but it really is. And whether that's finding someone to just be able to run some blood work by, or like, you know, get nutrition and training guidance from, or just whatever it is, it's actually really hard to find like people like that in the industry, probably especially for guys as well. Like, I don't know, like women sometimes have a little bit more of that softer nature as well. And sometimes you actually find it harder to get the other aspect of like, give me the shit that's going to work. But I feel like it is quite tricky to have that sort of holistic approach in the work that you do as well, which is, something that I think you do incredibly well.
Thank you. I think that the women's health and fitness space is made incredible leaps, you know, and it's due to people like both of you guys. You know, it's just like, I think that the education that's put out now on women's health, like if I think that was around in like 2015 and stuff like that, it's like, oh, it'd be such a different game changer, because I think we've been through so many, and you guys probably make content on this, right? But so many phases of like what was popular in female like fitness and body composition requests back then versus where it's going to now. And, you know, you mentioned before, like something even that used to grind me as well is when I would see all of these like ex-competitors kind of like hang up their togs or whatever we call it, right? or the shoes.
Hang up the heels, Ben. Hang up the heels.
And then start saying intuitive eating is my new coaching practice. And I go, it's not intuitive eating. Like,
or they just start shitting on bodybuilding.
What you're doing right now by not tracking and like leaving the bodybuilding days behind, that's not intuition. That is a PhD that you have, right? And so now you can just deploy that however you want.
Yeah.
But I think across the board now that you have a lot of great female educators that really capture the space, like way better than, you know, the teens.
Oh, 100%. It's come a long way, thank God, right? We always laugh about the old days. But yeah, I have a couple of quick fire questions, unless you've got anything else.
No, let's do it.
To wrap it up. I do have a couple of
great.
quick ones I didn't prep Ben for, but I know he'll be able to handle them. So answer these. They don't have to be quick, whatever you feel like. But top 3 supplements that you find yourself recommending the most to clients. This is going to be hard for you. You're like, oh, for what? But just top 3 that you feel like most clients, you're like, you know, most people would probably benefit from this, this, and this.
Yep. Look, I think that most clients would probably benefit from some type of polyphenols supplement, you know, so, and there's a range of them, but polyphenols are basically just a class of compounds that we find in plants. Okay, so you think blueberries, like really rich in polyphenols, and tomatoes and things like that. But when I look across the evidence on polyphenol intake and its associations with like just much less chance of like disease and death and things like that, and then I look at the average person's diet of what they're getting, I just think it's kind of like it's like a missing nutrient, because it's not technically a vitamin or a mineral that's essential for our, you know, physiology, but it can make such profound differences. And so if I get clients who for portions of the year or, you know, whatever, can't sort of commit themselves to enough polyphenols in their diet, I might rotate some through there.
So what would that look like? Is that literally
Well, it may
like...
even not be a supplement. It might be green tea. an actual tea, a drink.
Oh,
green
right,
tea
yeah.
is extremely high in polyphenols, for instance. But it might be some of the ones, like I think I'm dealing with so much immune dysfunction right now. Just people getting sick all the time.
Yep.
All the time. And it's something that I think has just gotten, well, in my opinion, it feels like it's much worse since COVID.
Absolutely.
So I think just like,
I vouch for that.
They're all
particularly-
sterile and
yeah, but just like, we got locked down and we got like, sedentary and like COVID itself was like devastating for a lot of people, as in not just in the short term, but like the longer term ramifications on people's immune systems and things like that. And some of these polyphenols are really good for like immune function and things like that too. I mentioned black seed oil before.
Yep.
Really good. Quercetin's another great one that's got like a staggeringly large amount of evidence on it from a polyphenol standpoint. And these things are very cardioprotective and neuroprotective. They tend to just really offer benefits that are exquisite. Like they are literally like drug companies look at these things and think, if only we could patent that.
Yes.
Right? Because it's that good.
yeah.
But they don't. There's no money in it, and that's the world of nutrition science. We'll only ever get like limited studies that have got enough funding and little trials because people don't stand to make profit from them. But I think most people are not consuming enough magnesium.
Yep.
That's a really common one. But I think magnesium is also one of the most abundantly taken supplements as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And creatine, which I know both of you are very familiar with, like, from a sporting perspective, but also outside the realms of sport too. I think that's like really beneficial for people's health too. One that I've changed my mind on recently is vitamin D. And what I mean by that is this goes back to like, looking at our former practices as coaches and then current ones, based on like just longer time frames, is that I used to just tell people, you don't need a vitamin D supplement. You just need to like go outside and like, because you absolutely should. But what you realize is that it's just hard getting everyone outside, like
Especially if you live in
consistently.
Melbourne.
Yeah, and then you got
Full
like,
on.
living somewhere like here, for instance, where the weather's not great. And so I still think that people should do as much as they humanly can to get outside, because there's benefits from, getting an appropriate amount of UV exposure that go beyond just your ability to synthesize vitamin D in the body.
Yep.
But vitamin D plays such a critical role in so many elements of health. And the science is just overwhelming now that I'm at a point where I'm like, you know what? Like if it's genuinely just not being done, I'll just say, I think you should get on a vitamin D supplement. You know what I mean? I really want those vitamin D levels to be optimal. And if it takes a supplement, then take the supplement, please.
Well, even back in the day, they would test for vitamin D deficiencies in maternity, et cetera, and just now they give it to everyone. They're just like, everyone just have vitamin D. Like we're all deficient. None of us get sun. So, one of those good ones. But polyphenols, what was the second one? Magnesium and vitamin D. Yeah, they're good ones. They're great. I wouldn't have said the first one, but that's awesome. If you could kill one trend in the fitness industry, what would it be?
If I could kill a trend.
Kill a trend.
Oh my God.
This will be hard for you too. Your brain's overthinking them. There's too many.
I'm just trying to think of a trend.
Or one thing that you see a lot in the fitness industry that you're like, ugh, that gives
The
me
reaction videos just wind me up now.
any videos.
Bit overdone,
Reaction
hey?
videos.
Oh, reaction videos. Fuck yeah. They're just
The reaction ones. It's just like they work. I get it. They work so well. But it was like, for me, I think consuming like a couple of good reaction videos, like they used to be like 2 or 3 years ago, not many people were doing them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, these are good. And then now every single person is doing a reaction
and it's
video
the
to
same,
someone
reacting
else.
to the same video too. It's
Yeah.
like, just find something else. Like, why are we all
Or
reacting?
just put out nice content that helps
Yeah.
people.
I find it's like, it just reminds me of that, like, that critic quote, what is it, the Roosevelt quote? It's not the critic that counts. You know what I mean? And I think it's all well and good to like try and dispel myths and truths and things like that. But I think, some people, when you have like an overwhelmingly large amount of people just kind of bagging out on each other and just reacting to this and that, I just get over it so quickly.
Yep.
And I just think to myself, in what other industry aside from health and fitness do they do that? Do you think accountants like do that? Do they just
No.
like go to town?
yeah, how
Is your-
embarrassing
No
is
one
it?
else does
Is
it.
your accountant using this software to do it? Like, is your accountant? I'm just like, I can't think of another profession that just
It's
has
so
such
true.
an obsession.
Why do we do
Like,
it?
do
Low
baristas do it? Do baristas kind of sit
No
there and on
one.
their Facebook page?
Oh, your coffee looks
Beauty,
like that.
hairdresser,
Yeah.
no one does it.
Nah.
But
No
in
one does it.
health and like nutrition, health, and in fitness, it's just people are obsessed with doing it. You know, I just don't get it.
I think it's any industry that has like low barrier of entry. And unfortunately, I don't want to, you know, but high insecurity levels from a lot of
Totally.
like
That's what
you
gets
combine
people
those
in the
two things
industry.
together and people can't emotionally regulate themselves, and it's like they get fighty and triggered, and then it insults their power and security and their authority, so then they attack that. You know, it's just it's a
mess.
It's an absolute mess, and it doesn't help you get clients, people. Like it actually pulls people away.
I think
like
exactly, but I think that in their minds they think that it does.
yeah, they feel powerful and strong. But it's like, well, I ain't reaching out to you. I've actually been drawn away from people to be like, damn, I would have brought your course or I would have read your book. But I'm like, you're a dick.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sorry, but I'm just not giving you $1. Like, that's the way it makes me feel. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know the stats. You know, everyone's got their stats that they would get from these type of things, but I can't imagine they're great anymore because when everyone starts doing the same thing, do you know what I mean? It just loses its efficacy, right? It's just like it just doesn't capture attention anymore. So like everything with, you know, content and social media or education or whatever it is, like this will be a phase, and then when people realize, oh man, I'm just not getting the interaction, the likes, or the progress I wanted from this, they'll move on to the next thing.
So
But your
true.
reputation's ruined. So you have to be careful which trends you jump on because people won't forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And also, like, you know, there's a lot to be said about people that can only build their authority and reputation from doing things like that, you know, and you've got to uphold that. As you said, like if your whole authority or your whole personality is making people laugh or triggering others, you don't have a business and you've got a problem. And I just feel like it's so true. It's like,
is.
you know, that doesn't build anything really. It's just, you're just doing it for the likes and engagement, and that doesn't last decades, does it, at all?
No, that's why we wanted you on because, you know, your content's so informative and it really empowers people. You know, you don't sort of drag people down for making poor lifestyle decisions or, you know, if people aren't as intelligent as you don't let them know that. You know, you try and help people. So it's great.
Thank you. Like the thing that I've come to appreciate as someone who, like, I don't overly enjoy social media. You know what I mean? I can understand its utility. I'm very grateful for it. Really grateful. I have a brand and a business because of it, right? Because I don't consider myself very good at marketing. You know, I don't. I've got so many other things that I want to be doing. Like if I'm not on social media, it's just because I'm working.
Exactly.
Like, as in sort of like other aspects of my work. But what would sometimes get to me is like I would do something and realize, oh, that kind of missed the mark. You know, and I'm always a big believer in like the market will dictate what's useful and not. You know, and so like it didn't get the likes or the comments or the views. But then I only have to look at my like other aspects of like my stats. If I look at my leads, if I look at my conversions, if I look at my waiting list, you know, and I'm like, I've got the biggest waiting list I've ever had. Like what you're doing, you realize it's getting to the people who count, you know, and I think that's an important thing is, you know, someone who's like trying to, social media is so dynamic, right? And I don't even pretend to be an expert in it. No way, right? I consider myself very much an amateur. But I've come to appreciate over time that I don't have to compare what I'm doing to what anyone else is doing at all.
Good.
Because what I think, I'm like, oh, that didn't go very well. But you look at how business is going and you realize, oh, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's very hard to make science sexy. Even myself with the exercise rehab type stuff, you try and be creative and it is quite hard at the end of the day. But then you do need to remember, hang on, I'm talking to a very specific audience and, you know, you want to throw elements of entertainment in, but at the end of the day, we're here to help people. We're here to educate them. It might not go viral or anything, but the real, you know, wins are your waiting list or your clientele, your actual patient and client results, because just because someone has millions of followers doesn't mean they're good at business, you know, so it's completely different.
Yep. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Ben. We really appreciate you coming down and making the time, because even just building off the back of what Danny was saying, like your content absolutely speaks to the people you're trying to speak to, right? So full reassurance, because I think I'm one of them. I'm like, oh, that's a great post by Ben. That's really good. So it doesn't, you know, like it doesn't have to make people laugh. You're teaching people, you're educating people. And a lot of these things that even we've just started to touch on today, like no one's speaking about them because no one fucking understands them, to be honest. So like if you can break some of this stuff down and make it digestible for people to even like just have one small habit or one small action to put in place, like that's all that matters, because you can have all the knowledge and education in the world, but if you can't create change in people, or if you can't get people to understand what you're saying, like what good is it? You know, and we see that all of the time. So the fact that you're able to even take a really complex like question of like top 3 supplements. There's probably like 5 million things going on in your brain. Like the fact that you can answer that, that's like your evidence that you've got, you know, the experience and the expertise and the knowledge base to be able to articulate your message. And that's, as what you were saying, like that's what matters. So yeah, Danny and I just really appreciate you coming down. And also, where can people find out more and potentially get on that wait list?
Yeah, join the wait list.
If they need your help.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. No, look, I mean, they can just generally reach out to me on social media. So just on Instagram under Benny Lifts, I've just got some links in there that they can come and visit through. And yeah, I just work consultatively or through coaching, do some mentoring and stuff like that. But you know, as I think I've made it sort of obvious, you know, throughout today, it's like not a particular niche that I'm working with. You know, there's coaches, there's some athletes, but there's a lot of just chronic health and disease. And there's also just a lot of optimizers. You know, a lot of people go, you know what, like I've just never had anyone look at my bloods or, you know, like do an appointment with me that kind of looks at it, how you speak, and that speaks to me. So, you know, can we work together? So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. We'll put all those links in the show notes anyways. But yeah, thanks again for coming on, Ben.
Thanks so much. It was awesome. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and hit follow so you can stay up to date with our podcast every week.